Smart object layers take our Photoshop layers even further. They allow us to do things that you just can't do with a regular layer. And we're going to go over a couple examples here. The first one is that they're kind of non-destructive. All right, once you create a layer to be a smart object, you can do things to it and you're not going to lose quality. Here's a perfect example. Open up the first image for this lesson. And I'm going to make a duplicate copy of the layer here. And let's go under free transform. So just go down to edit free transform. And I'm going to make this copy really small. All right, tiny, tiny, tiny. Hit enter or return. Now I'm going to go back into free transform. I'm going to make this copy a lot bigger, and you can see the problem that we have. All right, we got blurry, jagged, pixely photo. All right, and you'd expect that because you just can't do that to a photo. You can't make it smaller, and you can't make it larger again. But with a smart object, you can. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my original layer here. I deleted the first one. The easiest way to convert a layer to a smart object is just right-click on the layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. You'll also find it under the Layer menu, under Smart Objects. But honestly, right-clicking over here is just a lot easier. So now let's do the same example. Make it smaller. Got it. And then make it larger and watch what we get. See that? So we did not lose one bit of quality in this image because it's a smart object. And smart objects remember what they looked like originally. All right, so you don't have to worry about transforming this and doing something to it and losing quality in it because it knows what the original image looked like. The only thing I can't do in this example here is make it bigger than it originally was. So it knew that it came in at this size. I couldn't make it smaller and then decide to make it totally larger after that. I can only go as large as it was when I first converted it to a smart object. But that's not where smart objects stop. Okay, you can create these really cool templates, and that's probably my favorite use for them. So I want to show you an example here. We've already converted this to a smart object. If you didn't follow along, go ahead and right click on it and do the same. Convert it over to a smart object. Then what I'm going to do is make a copy of it, Command or Control J. And I'm going to free transform and just hold down the Shift key so it keeps your proportions constrained here. I'm going to free transform. I'm going to make this one smaller. And what we're creating is kind of I was creating it as a landing page for different parts of a portfolio website where you'd have maybe landscapes and portraits and commercial, and you'd have different photos and different text for each landing page for each gallery for that website, if you will. Okay, so that's what we want to create here. We're going to start the first one with landscapes. So I've got this layer. The next thing I want to do here is click on the background layer. Let's add a levels adjustment layer to this. We can do that in our adjustments panel. And the second icon from the top left is levels. Let's bring the black slider all the way at the bottom. Let's bring this over, and you can see it's lightening the photo that's underneath. It's almost creating like a screened version of this, and that's what we're looking for here. We're looking to take focus off of that bottom photo. All right, so I'll leave it at that because I've got my levels adjustment layer in the layers palette. And then the next thing I'll do here is click on the top copy of the smart object, and let's add some layer styles. So just double click. Remember, don't double click on the actual thumbnail. Double click on the empty space to the right of the layer, because that's how you open up that layer style dialog. And let's add a stroke to this. I'm not going to go with black. I'm going to choose white. And I think 3 is good, but let's change it to inside. And now let's add a little drop shadow to it. Change the angle. Drop the opacity. And increase that size just a little bit to spread it out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's take a look. Before and then after. I like it. Let's click OK. Now the last thing I would do here is add a little bit of text. So we're going to take our type tool and I'm going to type in landscapes. Because remember, this is the landscape portion of the portfolio. So I'm going to put landscapes. We'll put that right up to the top. I'll create another type layer and I'll just call it Bar Harbor, because that's where this photo is, not Bar Harbor. Bar Harbor. And because that's where the photo is taken, and let's make it a little bit smaller. So it's kind of like a subtitle, almost like a category inside of landscapes for Bar Harbor. And we'll just tuck that in there. So now I've got a title, I've got all that fun stuff. If I were to finish this off, I might do one last thing and make one layer on top of everything. Select all, and then I'm just going to add a stroke. Okay, just to put a white stroke around the whole thing. So go down to edit stroke. I'll go with 10 pixels and white and hit OK. And that looks pretty good. So there's my template. This is the graphic that would go in one gallery on the website. Now, the reason why I created this was because you've got lots of different parts, different galleries, commercial, portraits, still life, whatever it is. And I don't want to have to go recreating this template over and over again. So a very simple way for me to take advantage of smart objects is to just come down in the layers palette and click on one. Now remember, I made a copy. This was the original, and I made a duplicate of it. It doesn't matter which one you click on, so don't worry about that. Just click on one of them. Go up to the layer menu, go down to Smart Objects, and choose Replace Contents. When the dialog pops up, just go find the other image for this lesson. So this was lesson 20A. Let's go with lesson 20B here. Okay? And hit place. Watch what happens. Check that out. So Photoshop went in there, and it not only replaced the photos, which by this point, hopefully you kind of expected that that's where I was going with this. So it not only replaced both photos, not just the one, but it replaced both layers because remember, we made a copy. So it was smart enough to recognize that. It replaced both photos. It kept my adjustment layer right where it was. That's why I had to use an adjustment layer. If I didn't use an adjustment layer and I just used levels permanently, it wouldn't have worked. So I had to use an adjustment layer. It remembered the adjustment layer. It remembered the effects that I had on the layer. Remember how I put the drop shadow and the stroke? It remembered that. It remembered that I scaled this layer. It remembered that I made it smaller. So there was the original sized one, and then it remembered that I scaled this one. It kept my stroke. It kept all the text intact. Now all I would have to do is maybe come under here and change landscapes to commercial. And I could change Bar Harbor and all that fun stuff. And what I have now is another image that I can use for that website without having to recreate the whole thing. And you can save this as a PSD file. Just come up here, hit File, Save, go in there, save it as a PSD file. And then when you get to the point where maybe you close it down and maybe you leave your website as is for a while, and then you decide in a month you want to change things up and you want to make it look a little fresh. Open up that PSD file, click on one of the smart object layers, come back up here because everything's going to be saved. Click on the smart object layer, go back up to replace contents, and I'm just going to replace it with the original image that we had here, and hit place, and it changes it again. So you can replace it with any photos. My only suggestion to you is that you keep a photo of the same orientation in there. It's going to get kind of funky if I tried to put a vertical photo in here with the landscape oriented photo. So make sure you keep the same basic orientation or it's going to look a little bit weird. But that's pretty darn cool considering this is a layer and I can start to create these templates and have Photoshop do the work for me of replacing everything instead of me having to manually go inside of there and do it. Now this is a perfect segue into the next lesson because one of the things that goes along with smart objects is smart filter layers, which is a non-destructive way for us to apply filters. So make sure you check out that video too.